So a very good afternoon to all of the people present. Thanks for joining in to this fourth keynote session of Founder Speak. Founder Speak is a monthly event to connect aspiring entrepreneurs with successful founders and serial entrepreneurs with great exits. The speaker will share their journey to the startup ecosystem and how they tried their venture to make it a success. I'm very honored to introduce our speaker for today's session, Mr. Manish Gupta. Manisha is an alumnus of IIT BHU, batch of 1994 from the Department of Mechanical Engineering and has completed his MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. Manisha co-founded Indegene in 2000, which is a health tech solutions company helping global medical organizations address complex challenges by seamlessly integrating technology and medical expertise. The company has been valued at over $700 million. So, sir, I would kindly request you to please share your startup journey with our budding entrepreneurs. Over to you, sir.
Sure. Thank you, Manish. First of all, thanks a lot for to all of you, the ESL at BHU, to invite me for this session. It's always great to be connecting back with our alma mater. I remember being there on campus in 2019 when we were celebrating our 25th year reunion. That's probably I visited campus in 2019 for this reunion after 25 years. I just didn't get a chance to go back to the campus, and it was really nice to be back. And it's always great to connect. So what I'm going to do is try to run through a few slides very quickly, right? I would really appreciate, and I think it makes sense for you all, rather than listening to my story and getting bored by that, quickly getting a context of what my journey has been, but then obviously make it into an interactive session, right? I would rather make this into a Q&A as quickly as possible, right? I'll stop in between for any question, but I just think this kind of a session is the better it is. The more interactive it is, the better it is. Does it make sense? Wherever it's possible, I would request if you could be on video. It just makes it much more interesting, right? Connecting back to your 27, 28-year-old self, or we've been cut from the same cloth, right? It makes the whole interaction much more personal and useful. Okay, so now with that, let me just try to share my screen. What is happening? It says host disabled print screen sharing. Is there anything you can do?
Manish, can you give sir the access?
Just yes, give it. There are two Manish Guptas. You'll have to give it to the one without the video.
One. So can you try now?
Yes. Okay, I presume all of you can see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. So let me quickly get started by telling you what we do at Indegene, right? So here is what we at Indegene are known in the marketplace is that we are the largest digital transformation partner for life science companies globally, right? As a standalone digital transformation partner to the life science industry, we are the largest one globally. Period. We pretty much work with most of the big pharma companies across the world. We work with a bunch of med devices companies, and we are deepening that capability. We started working with a lot of biotech, especially in the United States. And again, we are deepening those capabilities, right? What really differentiates us and makes us special and has enabled us to grow is that we are able to bring three things together: a deep technology expertise with, again, very strong medical expertise, and medical expertise, technology expertise coming together to build solutions for the healthcare industry, and then the ability to scale them, right? This is an industry which is large, and the ability to scale becomes very important, right? So these three things, very few companies have been able to get them together. right? Solution driven approach, technology and medical expertise coming together, and the ability to scale. That's what we've been able to do very well, and enabled us to create a pretty decent footprint. Right, we have close to 3,600 employees today. This is growing very rapidly, right? Just to give you a sense, when the pandemic broke, we were 2,200, and I know that we have close to 500 positions open as we speak, right? So which means by the in the next 2-3 months, we will be more than 4,000 people, more than 1,000 with life science medical expertise background, a lot of M farms, doctors, probably one of the largest places. Largest number of doctors working full time. Obviously, we have a lot of technology folks working with us. We have presence pretty much, I would say, global right now. We have multiple offices in North America, Princeton, LA, Atlanta. We have offices in Montreal, Toronto, multiple places in Europe, including Ireland. In India, we are primarily in Bangalore, although we have a very small office in Mumbai. We have offices in Shanghai, in Dalian in China, in Singapore. We just before the pandemic had opened up an office in Japan and have close to 15 people there now. As we speak, we are setting up center in Mexico, right, and Eastern Europe. So a fairly decent global footprint. We have done over just the last 7, 8 years. We have done 7 acquisitions, all of them outside India. The last one was in 2019. We acquired a consulting firm focused on the life science industry, in Europe. But that's what you see as DT Consulting, right? So that's broadly we do as Indegene, or that's who we are as Indegene. We work with the life science industry to enable them to do 2 things. One is, as they move more and more digital and they modernize their commercial and medical infrastructure to be able to commercialize products, right? And mind you, most of our clients are the ones who have innovative products, right? The discovery-driven pharma companies, which is the largest portion of the segment, not so much generic companies, which is what most of our Indian companies are, right? So we work with these companies and help them modernize their medical and commercial organizations to be able to bring products to the market much more effectively and efficiently. We run centers of excellence to do that. What we've been also able to do is go to pharma companies and say, you know what, instead of you doing all this stuff, give us your product. Using a digital first approach, we'll reach out to physicians and patients and drive prescriptions for your products, and we'll take a gain share on that, right? So that's broadly what we do. Before I move on, any questions? No? Okay. So let me move on. Now, or was there a question? Okay, so I'll move on and now do a flashback. Close to 27 years back, I passed out in '94. I still remember while I was from Lucknow, my parents grew up in Lucknow, parents were in Lucknow. But there was a brief period when they were Chandigarh, and from BHU, after my last day, I had to go to Chandigarh. No tickets were available in the train, and all of us used to travel in trains those days. There's a friend of mine from BHU again who said, why don't Chandigarh ticket nahi mil raha hai, main Dehradun aa ja. And I jumped into the train to Dehradun with him instead of Chandigarh. I think that might have been the last time I would have done something like this. I hope there are people on this call, and some of you still do those kind of stupid things, right? That ghar Chandigarh mein hai, but Dehradun pahunch gaye. 3-4 din baad chale jayenge. From there, went after a couple of days to Chandigarh, started my job, and I had gotten to Levers that time, which was one of the best jobs on campus. Realized that I didn't want to work in the factory, changed my job after a year, got into TCS, but after 2 years, I went to IIM Ahmedabad. And it was very clear to me I wanted to do an MBA, right? And did my MBA from IMA. Again, joined banking after campus. It was just driven by the lure of the best jobs, right? The banking was hottest sector, joined Gridless that time for corporate banking. Realized, made a mistake, don't enjoy that. Joined Infi, which was a very hot company that time. It's not like now, right? In '99. And again, realized that while had some fun over there, because Infi was in a very growing stage, that corporate life is just not for me, right? I don't enjoy this whole career one step after the other, right? And I wanted to have much more space, all this stuff. and got to start something. Then along with a few others, did a lot of thinking, and we were very clear that we wanted to create something which is differentiated, known on a global scale, and healthcare looked like a good area to start with, right? In fact, me and my colleague, co-founder, a person who was a senior of mine in Ahmedabad, a medical doctor, we joked that if you would have stayed in the corporate career of ours, then one of the two things would have happened: that either we would have gone mad, right, or we would have gone to jail because we would have shot somebody. So we were so frustrated seeing some of the large company cultures, and started this thing. So finally, like everybody else, we had a beginning. And what I have done in this deck is I've taken real snapshots of either pictures, right, or the decks we had used, right? We pulled out decks from 2000, 2005, 10, whatever it is, right? So you will see artifacts of real stuff, which we either took to investors, our board, right, employees in this presentation to just tell you this story. So we started off, what you see over here is a younger me, one in some of the pictures, along with some of my co-founders, right? This was the house in Bangalore, Koramangala. Anybody, if you know, it's Bangalore, where we got started on the left side. And just like any 26-year, 27-year-old, a lot of you are much younger on this meeting, right? That's what I was that time. We also wanted to change the world, right? And a massive plan of how healthcare is broken over the next few years. This is, by the way, a slide we took to investors. We're back in 2000, at how we will go build, essentially build a integrated information and transaction healthcare network, right? And we leverage this to do X, Y, Z. All of that stuff is there. It was a pretty massive plan. And we just didn't put the plan. We had a fairly detailed execution plan, what we'll do, right? We'll build credibility with doctors. Sashu just asked me about how do you do with sell to doctors. We said we'll build doctors as customers and also partners. You'll use that to go to pharma companies, right? And then we'll go to labs, go to patients, hospital, insurance companies, blah, blah. The whole plan was set up, right? We raised a small amount of money, by the way, from venture capitalists that time. And that in 2000, the venture capital environment in India was just getting started, right? It was very, very early days. And there were hardly anybody funding stuff. We needed some money for this. We raised some bit of capital, $400,000 to be precise. Even those days, $400,000 didn't go a long way, right? It was a very small amount of money. Nevertheless, we got started, right? And did some very interesting things. Those days, we started building relationship with doctors, getting medical content, used things like there used to be a device called Palm, which was very popular in 2000 with the medical fraternity, especially, right? These are obviously days when you had mobile devices were really rudimentary. You had a protocol called WAP, which was used on mobile devices. We did all programming, which included medical content, right? And all these things at that time. So you see some of the stuff on this slide. Lancet, which is one of the most leading medical journals in the world, recognizes as the most credible source of information, at least in this part of the world. That's what you see over here. We got to start working with WHO in some way, right? So we had started doing all this stuff. It was good fun. The whole plan was that we'll do all this stuff, build some assets, and then raise more money, right, to build what we had outlined for. Now, we had some fun, but as Mike Tyson says, the last person you would expect strong wisdom to come from, right, is that everybody has plans till you get punched in the face, right? And that's what happened with us, that we had very detailed plans, but 2001, there was a dot-com bust. Now, what happened with the dot-com bust is that investors itself went bankrupt, right? So they had put some money, they went bankrupt. Most of the other people went bankrupt in this industry. The venture capital industry, I would say, was pretty much dead by 2001. And right, markets at time. On top of that, you had 9/11. Obviously, all of you would know that, right? And the markets further tanked. So there is no way anybody could raise money in that environment, right? Over here. Now, from our perspective, it meant two things. Either we go back to our jobs, obviously, because none of us came from wealthy families, right? We had all the founders had the standard service, government type of family backgrounds, right? And we had to earn our bread, or we pivot and do something which makes us self-sustaining, right? Just like most, very lot of Indian entrepreneurs, I'm not passing any value judgment over here. At least most of them, at least those days, packing up was not a very nice option, right? And by the way, those days, entrepreneurship was not as glamorous as it is, right? And I think there's a problem with the amount of glamour which has got associated with entrepreneurship right now. But it was still a failed entrepreneur was not a great thing. Today, I would hire a failed entrepreneur as long as there have been some sensible things to do, right? I will jump at hiring people who have that experience, but that those days it wasn't. And more importantly, we just wanted to make this work, right? We are very passionate about creating an organization out of India which stands for global stuff. So what we did is said, here is what the assets we have built. We are credible with physicians. We have some innovative technology tools which can differentiate ourselves in the market. So why don't we build a pharma marketing services business out of this, right? Differentiated pharma services market. Our initial focus was only in India because we didn't even have tickets to go to the US, right? We couldn't afford flight tickets to go to the US. So we just used this to build a pharma marketing services or pharma services model in India, working with Indian pharma companies. Now, when I say Indian pharma companies, it could be still global MNCs, but they're Indian arms. Got into the track, started working with them. You see some of these things, the core, POC. So this is Novo Nordisk, GSK, Ranbaxy, right? These are some projects we did. You see a brochure of ours in this picture, right? We did this, and I would say had a decent run, right? We grew our revenues from 25 lakhs to 21 March to 7 crores by 2004. So I still remember the numbers, by the way, 2.25 lakhs going to 2.2 crores to 4.47 crores to 7 crores, right? But it was, and we also turned profitable because we had to run the company this time. In between somewhere this 2002, we also raised money from Karnataka IIT Ventures, 1 crore, by the way, to be precise. Probably I spend more on my personal trips all around the world right now, right? But it was a big fundraise that time, given that we were under always cash crunch because Indian customers just don't pay on time, especially, right? They spend a lot of, and cash flows was always a big issue. So for me to pay salaries was a big problem, right? On time. I still remember going to employees and saying, can you wait for some time? Does the salary delena? A lot of those people, right? So those kind of things we went through. But we were having fun growing the company. Somewhere in 2006, 7, sorry, 2003, 4 or so, we started asking the question, listen, while we're having some fun growing, but it's not what we want to do, right? We want to create a global company. And it's very evident that while we have created some capabilities in this space, if you want to create a global company, you need to be in the United States, right? That was 50% of the world pharma market, followed by 5 big European countries. But we didn't have the resources to do that. So we went out and again tried to raise money, right? Raised some bit of capital from a family office. By that time, we were tired with institutional investors, right? We had this whole experience, which was, I would say, pleasant. So we decided that we would rather have more long-term capital. So we went to the family office, one of the founders of Infosys, who had quit in 2000, and because he was the eldest in the whole Infosys founding team. We got him as an investor in the company, raised some money from him, his family office rather. By this time, we had a small team. One of the co-founders was a batchmate of mine from IMA, had quit because of the tough times we went through, right? We didn't have money to pay salaries to ourselves for almost, I would say, 2 years. So went through that journey, right? And some people cracked in that journey, right? Between 2002 to 4. Then we did all this stuff, raised money, and got into a slightly different trajectory, right? One of the things which we did is acquired a company in 2005, which was twice our size, by the way, right? Again, this is actually a business standard rail cutting. In 2005, we acquired this. We were probably $2.5, $3 million in revenue. We acquired a company with $5 million in revenue in the US that time. 2006, we did another small acquisition. Now, what happened is 2006-5, the acquisition we did, this large company had problems, right? And we had to deal with those problems with very little experience. We had to turn around this company in the United States, which put a lot of pressure on us to very quickly morph the business model in the US, build capabilities in India. Most of my gray hair came during this time, right? Between 2005, 8 to 8. to fix this company. Nevertheless, we fixed it, right? And by 2008-9, we had a nice business, $8-9 million in revenue, and profitable, a reasonable global footprint, right? Business coming from US, Europe. Parallelly, we set up Europe. We set up Southeast Asia, Singapore, right? All the stuff was going on in parallel. So we had this nice little business, which was growing on its own steam. But again, we asked the question, where do we go from here, right? And how do you build something which is really substantial and significant? Now, when we asked this question, there are a few things we looked at. That most of our business was project by project, right? This is again an internal slide, by the way. We had hired somebody very senior from IT industry, and this person said, you know what, here are customers. We have very less customers with more than $5 million in revenue. We have very few deals which are large enough, right? But we got to have more customers with greater than $10 million revenues. We should have many large deals. By the way, what you see over here, as a goal, 5 accounts greater than 10 million. We have a similar slide now internally, but the difference is that goal is greater than 100 million, right? That we should have 5 accounts greater than $100 million as a target. So the game remains same, the numbers change and dynamics change. So we had all this stuff, but then obviously we're still grappling with how do you do this, right? And the reason we said this is that after a certain scale, it was evident that your business has to be more recurring in nature, right? You can't be starting on a zero. And what recurring I mean is that if you have, let's say, $100 in revenue, you know at least 70-80% of that will continue as revenue next year, right? If you start on and that's a problem all consulting businesses face, right? And if you start on a clean slate, then after some point of time, scaling becomes difficult. How do you plan? How do you invest? All that stuff. So which is the problem we are trying to solve? Now, while we are solving this problem and trying to think about what is the best way to do that, a parallel dynamic started playing out that the pharma industry, a global pharma industry, went through a big change, right? There is something called patent cliff, which happened. Some of you are from pharma would probably know this, that $200-300 billion worth of patents expired for the pharma industry. And the industry was under tremendous pressure. And there's a lot of change happened. I won't spend too much time on that in the pharma industry. And they had to reorient themselves, right? At that point of time, what we said is that, and by the way, this is an ugly slide, but I deliberately use this because this is actually an internal slide which was built for our strategy storming. We said if the pharma industry is changing, there will be a very different kind of a scramble over here. A lot of the small players will die, and we were a small player. Big players will get into it, which is exactly what happened. Accenture, Cognizant, you name it, right? All large companies start jumping into the space. And we will have to be very clear where do we want to play, where we won't play. And the reason this becomes important is that you have to take calls. In our case, one of the things which is happening is that there was a lot of opportunities in the clinical trial space. India had become a clinical trial hub that time. And everybody was saying, you have medical talent, you have some tech, you have pharma clients, why don't you also become a clinical trials company? And we said, we don't want to be the 101st clinical trial company in India. It doesn't make sense because we don't see what differentiation we bring to the market, apart from regulatory arbitrage, right? And we are anyway not good at that. So which are the places we want to be in? So that's the brainstorming we were doing. And we said, first of all, we want to be positioned in this whole space as a domain company, right? Very deep domain and IP, intellectual property, to support that domain. So that's what you see as the orange piece. Now, this is still high level over here. What that means is that we would invest in new models, right? And we said the bet we took is pharma sales and marketing, right, will be drastically revamped by technology, right? And we took a very first principle approach of ऐसे sales and marketing होती है अभी pharma में, but you know what, 5 साल बाद ऐसे होगी, right? And a rep does this, right? And then somebody else does this. Why shouldn't it be like this? And based on that, we build expertise inside the company and also build software, which is what you see over here. Now, by the way, a lot of this has changed. It's got much more mature for global markets. But again, as I said, I picked up slides from that time. This is actually a slide deck which we use to convince our board that these are the kind of things we're going to do, right? And make very significant investments in that direction. Now, this is something I'm really proud of because today most of our revenues comes from things which you see on the slide, right? Everybody is talking about digital today, but we took this bet in 2010 or so, right? And had to wait. We continue to grow, right? But the entire industry is going in that direction right now. But we were 10 years ahead of this curve and waited patiently for the time when the industry is going to morph into this direction. But anyway, so we did all this stuff and continue to grow the company, right? Somewhere in 2014, 15, between 10 and 14, 15, we grew 5x. We are again at a threshold, right? That what do we go from here? Because what happens is when you have some growth, everybody and their uncles want to buy us, right? All large IT companies were coming to us that they want to acquire us. And when you have worked so hard, right, seeing your company getting acquired for 60, 70, 50, whatever $1 million is not trivial thing. And we had to make a call that do we want to continue or do we want to exit, have a good life, right? And do something else in life. So we sat down, stepped back and said, okay, first of all, we said, you know what, we are enjoying what we are doing. We still believe this is a large space and you can create something which is really, really large over here, right? And we are having fun. We enjoy working with all the people. Let's take more risk, right? Double, triple down rather than actually selling. All these IT companies want to buy us out, we'll beat the hell out of them, right? In the market. We took that. And again, we said, okay, how do we double down, right? And here are the three areas we could do. We could build very domain specific capabilities. And there are companies like Quintiles, if we are now, bunch of other companies which had that. Then you could just do outsourcing cost type of a place, which most of the IT companies do, or more expertise and IP driven, right? These are different tracks. And each track had its own implications, what you do, right? In terms of capabilities, mindset. So we decided on one track, started making investments in this thing. Now, again, what I want to highlight over here is while we did all this stuff, in my introduction, we just spoke about that we did a fundraise recently, right? Raised $200 million. Just to give you a sense, 2016, 17, we again went to the market. We had gone to the market in a very similar way to raise some money, right? And we didn't need this money for expansion. We just wanted to broaden the shareholder base and have access to capital if required because we always were a profitable company, right? That's a direction we had taken. And I would say reasonably profitable, right? We have good margins compared to the industry. In 16, 17, when we went through that whole exercise, it became very evident to us that, you know what, while we investors were willing to invest in the company, and there are a lot of global investors who are interested, but we got convinced that we still have to do more work, right? And bringing a new investor at this stage would probably jeopardize this because they will have their own views. We'll have to build consensus with them. And where the market is, we don't want to mess around with that whole thing, right? So we walked out of a final binding term sheet with one of the global private equity firms in 2017 and say, we'll put our head down, continue to build, right? And at the right time, see when we get a private equity investor, right? And it's not easy to walk out of these deals, right? Which I said earlier, that IT companies trying to buy you out, guys, you have a binding term sheet, and you said, it's not the right thing, but we did that. Today also, instead of doing a private equity round, which we did, we could have IPO'd the company, right? Our size is much larger than a lot of the companies which are getting IPO'd. We are much more profitable than most of these companies. We have much more bigger customers, right? Our customers are all Fortune 500 companies, but we just don't think it's the right thing to do because the fact is that the market is going through churns, and as a private company, we have much more flexibility to make the right investments, right? And make the company into a much larger company. Now, this only makes sense if you're taking a very long view, right? If the objective is to monetize in the short term, then all this is stupidity, right? But if you're saying, you know what, I'm okay to play a 20, 30, 40-year game and I'm going to build an institution, then all these choices become important. But we took those calls, right? I'm pretty happy because between 2016, 17 to what we did right now, right? We got a 3x bump, right? Because of the stuff we did. So now we are at a stage where there are a bunch of things happening in the healthcare industry that, first of all, healthcare is an area going to continue to grow, right? Just demographics, more people aging, more chronic diseases, all this stuff, more mental health issues, you name it, right? Everything is pointing towards growth in healthcare as a market, right, and services. In that, this is an industry which has been slow to adopt technology, slow to adopt digital. We are one of the frontier companies in this space. There will be more and more shift towards new ways of doing things, and we want to be right at the front of that. There are enough pressures, whether it's reimbursement, cost, bunch regulatory, which is forcing the industry to adopt technology and digital in a similar way, right? So we will again have this cycle. We believe that over the next 5-7 years we have an opportunity to create $1 billion revenue company, not a valuation company in this space, known for expertise, known for know-how in very, very specialized areas across the world, right? And that's what we are trying to build. This is the same thing. There's a lot of stuff happening on the digital side. Right, so that's what we are trying to do right now. So while we had a lot of different stories in context of survival in the first phase, ideation, survival, right, globalization, then strategic agility in thinking through, placing some bets, then last obviously scaling up, right? I would say again it's scaling up right now. But there are some things which remain constant, right? From a cultural perspective. We said we always were entrepreneurial with prudence. Now, this is very different than the startup culture you see today, right? We said that we want to be always prudent in how we make investments, thinking about long term, right? And institution building. We are here to create an institution rather than just make some money, right? Money is a byproduct which happens if you're creating an institution, which is there. But keeping a focus on all these things, and these things conflict many times, right? When you're trying to do something fast, right? Think is why worry about cost, right? Why think about processes? All this kind of things happen, and you have to make the right calls depending on your objective in the end. And I believe as Indegene, we have done that reasonably well. So those are my slides. I'm going to stop these and just make this into a Q&A and any questions you have. I'm sorry if I went too fast. I just don't like slides, but had to give some context.
Can I?
Yeah, was there any question?
Can I go ahead? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes. You go ahead.
So thanks for explaining to us about Indegene and how your journey has been. One question that I had from your slide is that how did you go about saying no once going far with the private equity firm around 2016 without burning any bridges with them?
So that was first of all, we were fairly professional in terms of our interactions, Sashwat, and we acted. We had conversations with them, told them our reasons, right? That we believe this is not the right time, and we want to make investments in the right places. So the only answer to that is a lot of communication and open and transparent communication, right? And in some cases, obviously, it also depends on how the private equity person is, right? And it's not only private equity. The same thing would happen with the investor, employee, one of your board members moving forward, right? If you have to change gears, first of all, it's just better to think through in the beginning. But in many cases, you can't, right? Because you have to see real data and get confronted with that. Then I would say a very open, transparent communication is the way to do it. And that's what we did. Sashwat, you're on mute if you're asking something.
Yeah, I'm asking that could you also tell about how did you bring your first business customer as a startup? What was the process like for you?
So the process was, first of all, we spent a lot of time thinking through that what is our differentiated proposition, right? What is that we bring to the table, which is slightly different from others. And you know what, there is no simple answer to what you just asked, because after that, it's all about scramble, right? Or hustling, as it's called, right? We obviously somehow got introductions. It also happened that at least there was some Ahmedabad connections we had in the pharma industry. People who, because of the alum connection, right, were willing to give us our first break. Reached out to them, pitched to them, put our necks out that we are able to, we can deliver on. We are able to take some risk on this whole engagement. So all that stuff. I just wish I had a very clean answer to this, but the same thing happened when we went to the US, right? In the first go, that how do you get your customers over here, right? In that case, we hired a consultant who could introduce us to people. In India, that was not required because we could use our networks. But that's been the typical approach. And that's a problem which we face today also. That how do you, if you're pitching to a $50 billion pharma company, right, and you're at a certain level, how do you pitch to the global CEOs or next levels of that, right? Again, using various routes, right? But continue to think about your proposition, remain central. And then after that, everything is hustling.
Makes sense, sir. Thanks a lot.
So there is a question in chat section. In 2011-12, Economic Times named Indegene as one of the best companies to work for professional service industry. What were the steps and what was the secret which helped you achieve this milestone?
So I would say there are a few things. One is, as I said, the approach of being taking a long-term view. If you want to be an institution, right? And if you remember my last slide, it says institution building. End of the day, what is the core between in an institution? It's about the culture you have over there, right? And the long-term orientation you have. Now, a lot of those things very quickly we had decided, right? And very early on in our cycle, way back in 2004-5, we had soul-searching discussions and said, and I still remember we used to have various arguments with various people, right? Who would say, we're putting too much process. We are putting too much of these kind of things. We don't need this, right? And our take used to be that, you know what, you just cannot say that I'm going to do certain things in a certain way, and then all of a sudden become $100 million company and say, I'm going to switch this on and start behaving something differently tomorrow, right? You very early on decide who you want to be and then invest in those processes, culture, organization, whatever it is. And we took those directions very early on, right? Which meant the kind of people you got in place, all that stuff was in context of a certain culture. And then somewhere in 2005 or so, we really started investing in processes in a big way, which is a part of institution building again. And these processes were operational processes and also people processes, right? And the way we defined revenue targets and all this stuff, being one of the best places to work was a goal for us, equally valid and important goal, right? So I'll go back to belief and aspirations as the biggest thing. Then obviously doing whatever is required to achieve that very early on in the life cycle.
Totally makes sense, sir. So, sir, actually, we have opened a form while registration. So we have received some questions from our attendees,
Sure.
And I would like you to answer them. So, what were your initial thoughts when you started your journey to where you are now? What were your insecurities, and how did you overcome them?
So that's a good question, a tough question. I think thoughts were that, as I said in that slide, that we want to create so our thoughts were more on creating an enterprise, right, which is differentiated and known on a global scale, right? Those were the big drivers for me, at least personally, right, over here. And I think for all of us as the starting team. Now, healthcare happened to be an area where we believed that you could do something of that sort, right? Because it's an unsolved area in 2000, and I would say the same thing even today, right? Even today, it's an area where some big problems remain, and the industry has to do a lot. So those are the thoughts. Then beyond that, as far as insecurities are concerned, the insecurities if you think about it, in the beginning part are all about failure. What happens if you fail, right? What do you do, especially if you come from a background where you're not completely financial secure, right? That you know what, there's a trust at the back which will take care of you, right? Most of us don't come from those kind of backgrounds. So that was a big insecurity always for some period of time. That at some point in time also flipped, right? At some point in time, it started that insecurity. Today, for example, my insecurity is always that, you know what, we are in a very good stage. Now, financial security is hardly an issue, but are you doing justice to the opportunity and the platform which has got handed over to you, right? And are you really building something which is very well known, right? You don't want to be the second, third company in a space when you have a clear opportunity to be a world beater. So insecurities have ranged from financial insecurity, what will I ever do, it doesn't work, to the range of, you know what, there are so many expectations on me, and do I deliver on that, right? Am I doing the right thing as a leader, right? Whatever is required. So those kind of things every time, that are we doing the right thing? The challenge as an entrepreneur you always have is that you don't have other people to blame, right? That's a very nice thing in a job, that your boss is an idiot or somebody else is colleagues are jokers, right? I still remember my time in Infi that it was so easy to point कि इसको ये नहीं आता है, कैसे कर सकता है ये चीजें, right? But here the only person I have to blame is the mirror. If something is going wrong, which becomes an issue from multiple counts. I don't know whether I answered your question or it was too much blabbering.
No, sir, that was totally right.
Sir, can I ask a question by unmuting?
Sure,
Yeah,
please go ahead.
Sir, actually, there must be a kind of insecurity you might have faced at least once, that you are at a good position right now, but tomorrow, if something goes wrong, and what if everything gets destroyed, what will happen and where would I be? How do you tackle this kind of insecurity?
So you're saying today?
Not maybe today, but maybe sometime you might have faced and you might have overcome it, I'm sure.
Yeah, so that is a insecurity. I'm pretty sure Athar, any entrepreneur would face at different points of time. The only thing is the implication change, right? For example, when 20 years back, my biggest worry would have been that combination of what do I do in life, right? I'll have to find something else to do because I also have financial issues. Or will have financial issues. So the fact is that nobody likes to be a failure, right? On the other hand, you have to accept that if you're getting into entrepreneurship, there are odds. This is an odds game, right? Whatever you do, it's not 100% guaranteed that you will be successful. Dealing with that part of things. If you go to 10 years back, right, not 20, not that time the company was small, so it's not such a big issue. But by the time when you are a few hundreds of people, right, then the insecurity is also about the fact that there are so many people who are looking up to you, right, to find give the right direction at a certain level. When you come to the level we are today, right, things like financial insecurity have been taken in place, have been removed. But you know what, there are expectations remain, and now there are global expectations. It's not only employees, you have investors, public, many more people, right, who are looking up to you as a play, and you want to be successful in your eyes and public's eyes, right? Whoever is betting on you. So I don't think insecurity is ever taken out from a entrepreneur till the time he or she hangs her boots and walks out of the company.
Okay.
Irrespective, you're a billionaire.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I have a question. What should be the backup for student and doing startups in the college?
Sorry, I couldn't. There was a lot of disturbance. Did any of you get the question?
So Can you please repeat, Vidya, or if you can just put it in the chat?
Yeah. There's a disturbance in your line, Vidya. So if you could put it in chat or try again.
Hope I am audible right now.
Slightly better, although there's still a lot of disturbance. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Try.
So my question was, what should be the backup for student startups or student entrepreneurs?
Listen, there is in today's world. First of all, I don't think there is too much need to worry about backup. Now, there are two things. Backup has two components, right? That there might be a period where you don't have income, right? 1 or 2 years, whatever it is, and you have to decide how much can you go in that piece. So there needs to be a financial way to cover that, and that's something which you have to figure out. Family, friends, whatever it is you can get, depending on what kind of background you come from. Now, there are some places, for example, I know Ahmedabad has a program called Mavericks, right? Where HT has, along with CIA, created a program where for people who get selected in that, right, there is almost a fellowship which is given for 2 years. It's not large, but you know what? There is at least no survival issues. So if there are programs like that, could enroll for that. The second issue really backup comes from, what do I do if this thing doesn't work out? 2, 3, whatever time you give it to, right? I think that in my sense, as long as you have done things in the right way, more or less, that you have really thought through things, right? And market related issues were the ones primarily. The wrong calls in the market are the ones which got you to things not work out. The market is much more open to hire those kind of people, right? In fact, I would say a failed startup experience is a good thing on the CV, as long as it's not been outright stupidity. So that's not something to worry about. But the reality is startups entail risk. I still remember I was in a discussion in IIM Ahmedabad class, very similar to this, but it was a physical meet. And there was a very successful Gujarati entrepreneur in that meeting with me. Person could speak in Hindi, right? And he said, I'm assuming all of you know Hindi, given you're living in Banaras, that किसी भी startup के लिए 3 पा बहुत जरूरी होते हैं. पा is in the Hindi पा, right? सबसे पहला प्रार्थना, right? Things have to be aligned. By the way, Jeff Bezos says the same thing. But the most important thing for any startup to succeed is stars getting aligned, right? Because there are so many things which can go wrong, right? The second thing this guy says is parishram, right? That you have to work very, very hard. And the third thing is pratiksha. It is a game which yields results over a period of time. There are some people who get lucky breaks very quickly, but most of the people it's a long game. Now, if the game works, then obviously there is a big hockey stick effect, right? Compared to anything else. If it doesn't work, there's always risk. That's the nature of the game.
Thank you, sir.
Any other last questions?
Tanishq, we have received any other questions which you may want to
Yes,
cover?
so I think, sir, we can cover one more question. So what do you think is the key to build successful teams, and how should one select a co-founder that complement his qualities?
Sure. So as far as the co-founder question is concerned, I think one very important thing is you have to pick a person who has the same value systems, right? That's really absolutely critical. And value system, picking a person with the same value system doesn't mean that you agree with the person on everything, right? It essentially means that you at least at a very more philosophical, deeper level, like the same things, have very similar beliefs in the life, right? For example, things like institution building, I said, right? You have a long-term view in life. There are a bunch of things like that, right? And I'm just taking things like ethical and all the stuff for granted. Being a people's person, all those kind of things have to be really well aligned. Otherwise, it becomes an issue. You'll have a fight very quickly. Beyond that, people now the challenge is many times just because you're a batchmate or whatever it is, friend, right? Make that mistake. After that, you have to ask yourself that what skills do I have? I'm a marketing person. I'm a tech person. Whatever it is, and then call that out. That my basic core is this. That I'm basically a tech guy, right? But you know what? For a company to be successful, I need somebody who has a market orientation, right? Is out market guy. So let me have a co-founder who has that skill set and mindset. More important, right? Can continue to grow in that area. And I just took technology and marketing. There might be other areas, right? Over here, things like finance and all that stuff. So you have, but to get started, depending on the skill sets required, right, to reach a certain scale, you have to pick that in context of your business model, and then get started over there. And also depends on what kind of people you are getting, right, at that point of time. But the value system question is very important. I would say the same thing applies for team, right? If you're taking a broad approach, you have to make sure that you have a vision which is large enough, right, and can excite people. That's the only way to build teams. And then be fair, get to the human values. But at least in my experience, that if you have a vision, there is this quote which I'd read somewhere that make no small plans. They ain't have the magic to stir men's blood, right? So if you have big plans, right, you attract teams, you do the right things, but at a very basic level, right? Being fair, honesty, transparency, those basic kindergarten things still hold true in human circumstances, even when you're doing a startup beyond the vision part of it.
Totally makes sense, sir. So, sir, I think we can take one more question. So what do you think are the pros and cons of pursuing a startup over taking a job at any reputed companies? So this is one of the questions that we have been asked a lot. So I would like you to answer this one.
So listen, this is a tough question and there is no real answer to that, because the question is that if you are doing a startup, right, and if you can model really or mathematically, if there is a way to model that, right, startups don't make sense, right? Because the probability of success is pretty low. And today's environment has changed a bit because there is so much funding over there. But I would discount that, right? Because finally you still go through the pain over here. So you do a startup because of a much more innate need, right? That I just want to do something, and it has to transcend Excel sheets or mathematical models you are building. If you have that kind of a calling, then obviously it doesn't make sense. You know, how do you call a Bill Gates saying I won't mess, or a Mark Zuckerberg saying that Harvard doesn't make sense? Let me start this. Right now, for each Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, I'm sure there are hundreds of people who haven't worked out. Now we don't hear those stories, but it's very difficult to say what was right, what was wrong, and don't try to build a mathematical model. Just take this decision based on a more gut thing. What do you really want to do? If there is a calling, you really think I want to do this right now. There's a bunch of things which have come together, including co-founders. Then you got to jump into it, right? But if those have the right reasons for the startup. I didn't get a good job, right? And not enjoying, then really never thought about a startup. That I don't think is the right reason, right? Put more fight to find a right job.
Thank you, sir. So I think now it's the time to wrap up the event. Thank you, sir, for coming today and sharing your amazing journey with the startup ecosystem here. I believe everyone learned and gained a lot from this session. Also, thanks to all the attendees who joined in to make this session interactive and engaging. We will be having our next session of the Founder Speak soon, and it will be communicated to you all shortly. Till then, goodbye and take care.
Thank you, everyone. All the best for all your endeavors.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Bye.